Welcome to The Explainer. You know, your immune system is your personal round-the-clock bodyguard. But what happens when that bodyguard gets a little overzealous? Today, we're diving into hypersensitivity, basically a field guide to the 4 main ways your body's defenses can go from protecting you to hurting you. Let's dive in.
All right, so here's the game plan. First, we'll set the stage and figure out what this overreaction thing is all about. Then, we'll walk through each of the 4 types, one by one. We've got the allergy alarm, a case of mistaken identity, some serious collateral damage, and finally, a delayed assault. First up, let's talk about the core problem.
Okay, section 1, when your body overreacts.
So, seriously, have you ever stopped to think about how weird allergies are? A harmless little speck of pollen floats into your nose, and suddenly your body just declares all-out war? It doesn't make sense, right? But this isn't your immune system failing. No, it's the system overreacting, and there's a name for that.
This is the official term hypersensitivity. Think of your immune system like a super sophisticated security team. Hypersensitivity is what happens when that team sees a totally harmless tourist, like a piece of pollen, and mistakes them for a major threat. So they launch a full-scale operation that ends up damaging your own building. The intention was good, but the result, not so much.
So, let's meet our first culprit. This is the one we all know and, well, don't love. Type I, the immediate reaction. This is the hyper-alarmist guard of your immune system. It sees a tiny mouse in the kitchen and not only pulls the fire alarm but calls in a SWAT team and floods the entire building. Total overkill.
The 2 things you absolutely have to remember here are speed and a special antibody called IgE. This whole reaction kicks off in minutes, and it's all because this IgE molecule is acting like a tripwire. So how does this tripwire get set? It's a 2-part story. The very first time you encounter an allergen, your body quietly prepares for war. It creates these IgE antibodies which go and coat cells called mast cells. Just think of them as tiny pre-armed grenades scattered around your tissues. The funny thing is, you don't feel a thing. Not yet. But the second time that same allergen shows up, it latches onto that IgE and boom. The grenades all detonate, unleashing a flood of chemicals like histamine.
And the fun doesn't stop there. That initial sneezing and itching, that's the early phase, all thanks to histamine. But hours later, a second wave of immune cells, called eosinophils, shows up to the party. These guys are heavy hitters, and they just cause more inflammation and tissue damage. That's what gives you that lingering, drawn-out, I still feel sick feeling.
What's wild is how this one single mechanism can cause so many different problems. If those grenades go off in your nose, you get hay fever. If they go off in your lungs, it's asthma. On your skin, it's eczema. In your gut, it's a food allergy. It's the same exact process, just happening in a different neighborhood.
Okay, so up until now, the target has always been some harmless thing from the outside world. But what happens when the immune system turns inward? What if it starts attacking our own cells? Well, that's when things get a lot more serious.
And that brings us to type 2 hypersensitivity. If type 1 was an overreaction to a harmless outsider, type 2 is a tragic case of mistaken identity. This is friendly fire. This is our immune system attacking its own side. So here's the crucial difference. In type 1, the allergen was just floating around. In type 2, the target, the antigen, is fixed in place. It's physically part of one of our own cell's surfaces, or it's embedded deep in our tissues. This isn't a general alarm. It's a direct, targeted assault on our body's own infrastructure.
And this assault happens in a few different ways.
First, antibodies can basically put a kick-me sign on our own cells, tagging them for destruction by cleanup cells. Second, they can trigger something called the complement system, which is like a wrecking crew that punches holes in cells until they burst. But the third way is maybe the most fascinating. The antibody doesn't actually kill the cell, it just hijacks it, either by blocking its communication signals, like in myasthenia gravis, or by hot-wiring it to be permanently on, like in Graves' disease.
All right, on to type 3. Now, this isn't a direct attack or a case of mistaken identity. The best way to think about type 3 is collateral damage. It's like the mess left behind after a huge battle
that nobody bothered to clean up properly. Pay close attention here, because this is the key difference. Remember, in type 2, the target was fixed to a cell. In type 3, both the antibody and the antigen are just free-floating in your blood. So they bump into each other, they link up, and they form these little clumps. Now, your body is usually pretty good at clearing out these little clumps, these immune complexes. But sometimes there are just too many of them to handle. So they get stuck, usually in the walls of tiny blood vessels. And they just sit there, acting like a beacon for massive, widespread inflammation. So the problem isn't really the initial fight, it's the leftover wreckage causing all the trouble.
So where does all this wreckage pile up? Well, it tends to get stuck in the body's natural filters. We're talking about the super delicate blood vessels in your kidneys or the lining of your joints. When these complexes get deposited there, you end up with serious conditions like glomerulonephritis, arthritis, or vasculitis.
And that brings us to our final category, type IV. The first 3 types we talked about were all about antibodies, and they happened pretty fast. Type IV, it's the odd one out. It doesn't use antibodies at all. This is a slow-moving siege led directly by your T cells, and it takes a while to get going.
So the 2 phrases you need to burn into your brain for type 4 are T-cell mediated and delayed. And I mean delayed. We're talking a full 24 to 72 hours before you even see a reaction. Why? Because it just takes that long for the body to rally the right T cells and get them to the battlefield.
And this T cell attack has 2 different strategies. In one, you have helper T cells acting like field commanders. They don't fight directly, but they release a ton of chemical signals that call in an army of other inflammatory cells. The other strategy is much more direct. Killer T cells literally hunt down targeted body cells one by one and execute them.
You've almost certainly seen this in action. You know that hard red lump that shows up 2 days after a TB test? That's a textbook type 4 reaction. That horrible, itchy, blistering rash you get from poison ivy. Also type 4. It's even the main reason why a body might reject a transplanted organ. It's the T cells leading the charge.
So there you have it. An immediate allergy, a case of friendly fire, collateral damage from leftover battle debris, and a slow, delayed siege. 4 completely different ways our immune system can hurt us by mistake. And realizing how different they are, well, that's everything. The better we get at telling these types apart, the more we can design smarter, more targeted therapies to calm each specific storm. That isn't just better science, it's the future of medicine. Thanks for watching The Explainer.